Hello, dear students. Welcome to the fourth part of our first chapter of history, Rise of Nationalism in Europe. In this part of the chapter, we are going to cover the age of revolutions as well as the ideas of Romanticism. So let's start. So first revolution is of France that occurred on July 1830. So the Bourbon kings who were restored to power were overthrown by liberal revolutionaries. So what we saw previously was that conservatives had restored these Bourbon kings. So when liberal revolutionaries, when they came to power during these revolutions, they again overthrew these Bourbon kings. Now the place for the king was empty, so they had to install someone to rule them. So they installed a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe at its head. So they selected Louis Philippe at the head of as the head of the constitutional monarchy that they were going to establish. I hope you all know very well about constitutional monarchy. It's simply a monarchical form of government where the power of the kings are restricted or ruled by a constitution. So that's a constitutional monarchy. So the liberals overthrew the Bourbon kings and installed Louis Philippe. They installed Louis Philippe as their head. So this was known as the July Revolution, right, of France, July Revolution. So this revolution sparked an uprising in Brussels. So it's a very common thing that generally in all over Europe, whenever anything or any change occurs in France, automatically all the other countries, all the various small countries of Europe take inspiration from France. So that's why you would have read that Metternich once said that when France sneezes, all the other countries of Europe catch cold. It means if any revolution or any change is occurring in France, automatically all the other countries will also take inspiration from the same country and they will also follow the ideals that are going on in France. So in this case also, this was again a revolution in France, right? So this revolution sparked an uprising in Brussels. So by this revolution, Brussels took inspiration and finally it led to Belgium breaking away from the United Kingdoms of Netherlands. So earlier Belgium was a part of Netherlands. And after taking inspiration from this revolution, this July Revolution of France, the Belgium broke away from the United Kingdoms of Netherlands. So this was the revolution of France as well as some part of revolution in Belgium and Netherlands. Now we are coming to an interesting topic that is of Greek War of Independence. I think you all are well aware where Greece is. Greece is a very famous country in Europe. So it had been a part of Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. It means since long time, since 15th century, Greece had been a part of Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire is also near Europe itself, right? So Greece was a part of this empire in 15th century, Ottoman Empire. Now what happened that the people of Greece had an idea that or they believed that earlier they were independent, but slowly the Ottomans or the other powerful kings invaded their country and finally took over their independence. So they thought that they were independent since a long time and now they wanted to regain that independence. So they started getting support from other people like the other Greeks that were living in exile and some other Europeans. You would have read somewhere that Greek culture is very rich. We have already derived many scientists and many terms are derived from the Greek culture. So many of the Europeans of Western Europeans had some sympathies for the Greek culture. So they supported these nationalists who were aiming for the independence of Greece. So what happened next was we have an important name of Lord Byron who organized funds for this revolution of Greece revolution or the for fighting for independence for Greece. He organized some funds and then he even went to fight in the war. It means he had so dedication towards his nation that he even went to fight in war. He was a poet, remember. He was an English poet and he went to fight in the war, but he died there in the war itself. But he died of fever in 1824. So he was unable to see his country getting independent. He died previously itself in 1824. So finally, with all these steps undertaken by the Greek revolutionaries or the nationalists of Greece, finally the Treaty of Constantinople. Constantinople is a place in Greece itself. Remember that Constantinople is the name of a place. So this Treaty of Constantinople was signed between, of course, obviously between Ottomans and the Greece, and it recognized Greek as an independent nation. So finally, Greece got independence in 1832 by this Treaty of Constantinople. So this is a one mark question, that by which treaty Greece got independent. Then another question can be, when did Greece gain independence? And your answer would be 1832. So this is a one mark question, and this is also a one mark question. So you have to remember it very carefully. So let's move forward. Another interesting topic, the romantic imagination and national feeling. So far, what all we have learned was that anyone who wanted to gain independence or wanted their rights or rules, they simply were doing revolutions after revolutions. They were fighting, they had wars to gain independence. But the idea that we are coming towards now is completely different from what all we have learned. So now the people who had the idea of this romantic imagination will come forward to this topic. What is romantic imagination? But let's understand its concept, that some people who were following these ideals of romantic imagination and nationalist feelings, they didn't fight it, or they didn't went for wars or raised some revolutions against the autocratic powers. They simply displayed their ideas in terms of feelings. Let's see how. What is romanticism and what is this romantic imagination we are talking about? So culture played an important role in the creating the idea of the nation. So culture had an important role to play. Now, if you uh, develop unity among the people on the basis of culture, that yes, we all share a common culture, our ancestors have shared a common culture, then automatically people will start to come together and they will unite to form, or they will start having an idea of what a nation is. So again, culture had an important feeling to play. So art and poetry, stories, musics, all these are part of culture only. So all these things help people express and shape their feelings. So their feelings and their ideas were expressed by these ideas that were of arts, poetry, and stories. So this, now we are coming to the term romanticism. This is, what is romanticism? It is a cultural movement, remember, which is sought to develop a form of nationalist sentiment. So what does this romanticism includes? It means you are expressing your ideas, you are expressing your feelings of nationalism or formation of nation states with the help of your culture, your tradition, by the help of your folk story, maybe your folklores, maybe your folk songs, folk dances. So all these things are a part of romanticism. So romanticism is nothing but a cultural movement. And what was its aim? To develop a nationalist sentiment. And how? The steps were using art, poetry, stories, and music. So this is romanticism. There is no war, no one is going to die, no revolutions, no uprisings, just expressions of ideas and bringing a sense of unity among the people residing in the nation. So again, we have another great philosopher, a German philosopher, Johann Gottfried Herder. Romantic poets and artists focused on emotions, intuitions, and mystical feelings. So they didn't really actually believed on these scientific things or the ideas of wars or fightings. They simply focused on emotions, intuition, and mystical feelings. So let's read about Johann Gottfried Herder, who is a German philosopher. So what he said was, these are his two ideas that are labeled here. German culture. These are the words of this Johann Gottfried Herder. German culture was to be discovered among the common people. He believed that if you wanted to learn what actually German culture is, or if you want to spread the German culture, you can only find it among the common people. It means only common people can give you an idea what actually German culture is. Now, Das Volk is a term of in German. It's a German word that is actually meant for common people. So again, this is a one mark question. What do you mean by Das Volk, or what were common people known as in Germany? So it is Das Volk. Then another idea of his was it was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of nation popularized. Okay, it just covered popularized. So he believed that only folk poetry, folk dances, and through folk songs, people could get united and the idea of nation could be popularized. So here we have a word, Volksgeist. This is a word used for nation. Volksgeist. Again, this is a German word and it is used for the term of nation. Right? Okay, let's move forward. Now we have this idea, how did romanticism spread in different parts of the country? Here we are going to learn only about one example, that is of Poland. How did romanticism spread in Poland, and actually how they spread this idea of formation of unity in terms of folk dances or folklores. So Poland was partitioned at the end of 18th century by Russia, Prussia and Austria. So earlier this Poland was a part of, some part of Poland was in Russia, some part was in Prussia and some was in Austria. So at the end, by the end of 18th century, it got separated and formed another independent nation, that is of Poland. Okay. So even though it no longer existed as an independent territory, national feelings were kept alive through music and language. So earlier, when it was not independent, when Poland was not independent, it was a part of Russia, Prussia, and Austria. The national feelings that were in Poland, or that were the culture of Poland, was kept alive through music and language. It means they had a national sentiment of unity, that they had shared a common culture, their ancestors had shared a common culture, and they kept it alive through music and language. So let's see how. We have an important name, Karol Kurpinski. He is again a philosopher of Poland. Karol Kurpinski, how did he spread this idea? He celebrated national struggle through operas and music, turning folk dances into nationalist symbols. So all his idea was that he depicted the folk dances as the national symbols. He tried to show that folk dances were the actual culture of their Poland, and he tried to use folk dances as the nationalist symbol to bring unity among the people. So we have two folk dances of Poland, that is the Polish Polonaise. I have a picture here. The Polish Polonaise and the Polish Mazurka. So these are both the folk dances of Poland. Okay, so this is how they spread the idea of folk dances. This is again an example of romanticism, remember. This all we are learning is under romanticism. No war, no fights, simple expressions of idea in terms of their culture and their traditions. So this is romanticism. Still we are in Poland itself, remember. Now we are going to learn about the role of language, and this was the role of language in Poland only. We are still in Poland. Okay, so after Russian occupation, Polish was forced out of schools and Russian was imposed everywhere. So what happened? Polish is the language of Poland, obviously. Polish is the language of Poland. So when Russia gained the territory of Poland, what happened? They restricted the use of, or they restricted the learning or teaching of Polish. So schools use of Polish was banned. Now the teachers won't teach Polish, and Russian was imposed everywhere. It means the idea of Russian language or the spread of Russian language increased. They simply wanted to impose Russian language, that yes, you can't learn Polish now, you have to learn Russian language. So Russian was made compulsory in schools and Polish was thrown out. Okay. So now what happened, that many members of clergy in Poland, this is again a group of people, a community of people in Poland, began to use language as a weapon of resistance. It means to show their opposition or to show their resistance towards the rulers of Russia. They started using Polish language. Okay, so large number of priests and bishops obviously were put up in jail or sent to Siberia. Now, if they'll break the rule that was formed by the Russian government will obviously take some steps to control their ideas that they are spreading. So, what happened? The priests and bishops were put in jail or sent to Siberia by the Russian authorities. So, it was a sense of crime. Now, if you are using Polish, as they have already abolished the use of Polish, the Russians have abolished the use of Polish in the states or in the territories. So, if you are using Polish means it's a crime. Now, Russian government will have to take some action against your crime. So they used to put them in jail. Anyone who used Polish was put up in jail or sent to Siberia by the Russian authorities. Then what happened? Use of Polish came to be seen as symbol of struggle against Russian dominance. So Polish became as a symbol of struggle. This should be very clear that if they wanted to oppose Russian dominance, so they started using the Polish language to show their opposition, right? Now we have reached the period of 1830. Okay, 1830 is a very important date in terms of history. This was a period where people underwent through great hardships, hunger was widespread, and popular revolts were undertaken during this part of the century. 1830s is a very important year. So, what happened in this year? What's so special about this year is enormous increase in population. It means suddenly the population increased in Europe. Okay, and population from rural areas migrated to cities, right? So they started migrating to cities. Now, if they are not having any jobs, they'll migrate to the cities. Then small producers often face stiff competitions from imports. Now, the imports that were manufactured by the large industries or factories were quite cheap and they were available in large quantities. So the small producers who were producing something at their homes itself or on a small scale, they faced stiff competition and they were not able to make their livelihood. Okay, peasants struggled under the burden of feudal dues. Peasants were undergoing through these feudal dues and obligations that they had to complete. Then what happened? Rise of food prices and bad harvest. So due to a bad harvest, suddenly the food prices rose. Food prices rose. Then finally it led to widespread pauperism in town and country. So poor all around, you could say poor. There's no employment. Everyone's searching for some job. No one has food to eat. There were riots in some bakery shops in search of bread and all. So this was a period of hunger, hardship, and popular revolt. This date is being used in most of the chapters of history. 1830s. This was a time of hunger, hardship, and popular revolt. So this was our fourth part of the chapter. In the next part, we'll be covering the revolutions of 1848. That is going to be really very interesting, and the unification of different countries. So please see the next part of the chapter also to understand to finish the chapter. And I hope this all these points were very clear, and I was very clear to explain you. Okay, so many questions can be formed from this part also, and we'll be discussing all the questions of the chapter at the end of all the parts. Okay, so after we complete all the parts of this chapter, we'll be having a complete video for just for the discussion of types of questions that can be formed from this chapter and the most probably asked question or the most frequently asked questions from this chapter. So I'll see you in the next part of the video. You can watch the next part to complete the chapter. Thank you.